Hello, viewers. Tonight, I am going to talk about the name, Rinoa in Final Fantasy VIII. Basically, for those of us who want to understand more about the writing and the possible cultural implications, and influences that are in the game, which I honestly think are more than most people give it credit for. You may talk to some people and they may just say, oh, well, they choose such and such name because it's just cool. There's no real reason, thought put into them, which I would have to say, if you read enough books, if you read enough stories, you start to really pay attention to names. And especially when you can see that they correlate to particular themes in the story, which is the case in Final Fantasy VIII. So, without further ado, I might as well present this information. So, firstly, Rinoa, it has an Italian origin, and also a Japanese one. But right now, let us focus upon the Italian origin. And the Italian origin, basically, the Italian name Rinoa means queen or royal. So, they also mention here on this website, this is Ask Oracle, for baby names. They say on this website that, this was made popular by Final Fantasy. Nearly any website you go to for baby names that, have the name Rinoa will always mention the fact that the name was made popular by Final Fantasy VIII. So, this is very interesting because in Final Fantasy VIII, Rinoa is often called the princess. So, there are a few quotes we can read here. Firstly, from Zone and Watts, the friends of Rinoa. Just take it easy. Here, let me introduce you. Looks like you already met Watts. I guess it's just our princess then. It's the princess's nap time, sir. Is the princess still asleep? And Quista says, Squall, when you jumped out into space, you didn't think about anything else, did you? He says, that's right. I wonder if there's anyone who would do the same for me. Oh well. So where's the princess that changed the ever-cautious Squall? Because if you know anything about Squall, you know he is withdrawn. He does not talk much. He basically is a thoughtful person that spends a lot of time thinking. He's not very confident socially, which changes as the game progresses. He sort of opens up to the other characters and his personality changes, which was fairly good character development, I would say. But anyhow, so we know Rinoa is called the princess. In Final Fantasy VIII, directly called the princess, and as we know, the name Rinoa does mean, in Italian, queen or princess. Now, when we go to Delling City and we visit General Caraway, we go to Rinoa's house, not house, mansion, or even castle, really. If we look at it, it really does look like a castle. When we get to the end of the game, to Ultimecia's castle, that too is a castle. Now, for those of you who've not seen the earlier videos, I talk about the belief that many of us have who have played Final Fantasy VIII, even from a long time ago, that Rinoa is Ultimecia. But basically, for those of us who believe that, it is interesting that Rinoa is in the castle and Ultimecia is in the castle. And basically, for these big, gigantic, gothic buildings, these huge castle structures, the only, two personages, so to speak, if you consider them to be different, they're two. If you consider them to be the same person, it's just one person. But anyhow, basically, we have two places that look really big, intimidating, and castle-like. And that is Rinoa's home and Ultimecia's castle, which is interesting. And so, for many of us, we really do look at parallels to that, and they mean a good deal to us. And I say, this is sort of, in my opinion, something intentional. But anyhow, for those of you who, basically I'm going to read the definition for castle. I think we all know what a castle is. But a large fortified building or group of buildings with thick walls, usually dominating the surrounding country. A fortified stronghold converted to residential use. A large ornate building similar to or resembling a fortified stronghold. Now, Rinoa's castle is that, certainly. But also Rinoa's home is that. It even has this weird banner on it. This really does look like an old-fashioned, medieval stronghold, basically a castle. To be honest, at the very least, we can say this is a fortified stronghold, which is basically, this is a small castle, to be honest. The homes in Final Fantasy VII and VIII were quite interesting, but I have to say, this looks like a castle to me. And she is the princess. The Italian name means queen or royal. But anyhow, we have the Britannica Pocket Encyclopedia, medieval stronghold. That's what a castle is, generally fortified. The dwelling of the king or lord of the territory in which it stood. So without any doubt, I have to say this is a castle, and that Rinoa as a character is a very royal type of character. But anyhow, I think now that we have looked at the Italian name, we can look at the Japanese name, which the cultural implication of the Japanese name Lenore has to do with the poem The Raven, because there was a woman named Lenore in The Raven, and this woman was basically associated with angels, which is very interesting. So we have this cultural implication once again being very spot on, something you can see. Edgar Allan Poe is a famous poet. So let's go to the website that tell us basically what Rinoa means. So Rinoa is a charming feminine name with multiple possible origins. Some believe it originated from the Irish word ríoghan, which means queen. It is also seen as the Japanese equivalent of Lenore, a shortened form of Eleanor. So basically, this is not a Japanese name. However, even though it is not a Japanese name, it is based upon, let me see. This name is based upon a name that has its origin in French and Greek languages. So the Japanese adopted that name and sort of made a variation of it called Lenore. Rinoa. Rinoa is the variation of Lenore. That means sun, star, radiant, and luminous. And once again, just like the other website, they're mentioning the fact that this name was made popular due to Final Fantasy VIII. So, my personal opinion is that this name Lenore, the writers it seems to me took influence from both the Italian and the name Lenore. I would have to say, basically, I come to that conclusion based upon the fact that Final Fantasy VIII is a love story, but also a story that heavily deals with the subject of loss, losing a lover, or sort of unrequited love, a lost love, so to speak. It's very romantic, but it is also a very sad game. So we see, this quote, from the Palm the Raven: "For the rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels name Lenore." Now, of course, Lenore itself means radiant. It means light. So we know that basically Rinoa, she has wings, angel wings, and she is sort of, the white feather is heavily associated with her in the game, even from the beginning of the beginning cutscene, the full motion video. So if we go further here, we see once again the information we reviewed that comes from the website Mom Junction for baby names. Now we also have Ultimecia as a character, and there was something that I thought was significant. I've already talked about Artemisia and Ultimecia as a name, because there's a name that sounds very similar that starts with an A, and I talked a little about that, and I plan to review that at some other point in time. But right now, I want to talk more about the devil-like archetype that Ultimecia seems to represent in the game, and her association with the bird, the raven. So if you read the poem, The Raven, it saith, "Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil." Now he is talking to the raven that came into his house. And so, as a character, in contrast to Rinoa, who is associated with angels and has a name, Rinoa, which is a variation of of Lenore, which is a very famous name in the poem The Raven. Edgar Allan Poe is a famous poet known worldwide. But anyhow, if we're going to say that Rinoa, as an archetype is associated with angels, is angelic as a character, we would have to say that Ultimecia is rather demonic and rather devilish. She has the horns, and instead of white wings, she has raven's wings. So we have Rinoa here with her angel wings, and we have Ultimecia with her raven wings and her devil-like horns. So what we have here is a complete parallel, a complete contrast in character archetypes between Rinoa and Ultimecia. Now, those of us who believe Rinoa is Ultimecia believes that this is very logical in regard to a parallel. In that this makes sense if you are having a character who sort of fell from grace, or sort of had a change of heart, or became basically jaded about life. Once she was white and pure, now she, is associated with the color black in the raven. The white wings and white feathers are also often associated with the dove, so to speak, and black wings and black feathers are often associated with the devil. And so we can see a complete narrative archetypical contrast in which you have, Ultimecia as a character, whether you believe she is Rinoa or not, completely contrasting Rinoa, who is angelic. So the Raven has themes of love and loss, and we're going to read the whole poem. It is very interesting. So, and let me put a definition here for people who may not know. Surcease means cessation. We are going to basically have, now let me use this, because any words that you may not understand I will have written down here. I'll have dictionary entries for them. Okay, so surcease is the act of stopping. Now let me continue. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. 'Tis some visitor, I muttered, tapping at my chamber door, only this and nothing more. Ah, distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow. Vainly I had sought to borrow from my books the surcease of sorrow. This is to say, the act of stopping. He wanted to stop his sorrow by reading these books. Sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here forevermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, 'tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door, some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is, and nothing more. As far as I know, entreating means to request, to beg, to plead, so to speak. You are requesting something, as far as I know. Oh goodness, I did not spell this right on my dictionary. Let me do this. To appeal, to entreat, to implore, to beg, to beseech. Okay. Edgar Allan Poe used some words that we often do not use today. But anyhow, let me see. Where did I stop? Goodness. I may have to just use the search function because I really I cannot find where I stopped. Okay. Presently, my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. Sir, said I, or madam, truly, your forgiveness I implore. Implore means to beg too. It means, but the fact is, I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door, darkness there is and nothing more. Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming, dreams no mortals ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token. And the only word there was the whispered word, Lenore. This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word, Lenore. Merely this and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning. Soon again I heard a tapping, something louder than before. Surely, said I, surely that is at my window lattice. Let me see, then, what threat is. What thereat is, I mean to say. And this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind and nothing more. Open here I flung the shutter, when with many a flirt and flutter, and there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he. That is to say, obeisance is, as far as I know, a sign of respect, a bow, so to speak. But let me make sure, because I really want to get these words right, so that you, the reader, or at least a viewer, can understand this poem in its entirety. I think that is very important. Okay, let me see. For some reason, the paste is not working. I was copying it. Oh goodness. I am not typing this the right way. Okay. Let me see. An inclination of the head and body is greeting, consent, courtesy, submission, or worship. Great respect. Okay, let me take a look at specific dictionaries. Word web. The act of obeying. Excuse me. Bending the head or body or knee is a sign of reverence or submission or shame or greeting. So basically this is a sort of bow, a act of greeting, so to speak, for the sake of respect or submission even, but basically whoever this raven is does not care to do that. Not the least obeisance made he, not a word stopped or stayed he, but with mean, and mean a face. When it's written M-I-E-N, it means your face. With mien of lord or lady, perched above my chamber door, perched upon a bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door. Now, Pallas is Athena. Pallas was the name that Athena was given, but Pallas, I believe she had received that name for killing someone called Pallas or something of that sort. Because Pallas is also a titan, but in this case, I'm pretty sure that this is a bust of Athena, the Greek goddess. So, perched and sat and nothing more. Then this ebony bird, beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou, I said, art sure no craven. Ghastly grim, an ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore, tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore. Quoth the raven nevermore. Plutonian means basically something of the underworld, something related to hell, something related to, the god Pluto, and basically something dark and sinister and grim overall. Now, craven, we read that word, that means an ignoble, uncourageous person, basically a coward. If you're a craven, you're a coward. So I hope that helps you understand some of these words which are not often used today. Much I marveled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore, for we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door. Bird or beast upon the sculpted bust above his door. And the bust is a small statue that is not. There's basically a torso of a statue, basically, with such names nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely on the placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word did outpour. Nothing further than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, other friends have flown before, on the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before, Then the bird said, "Nevermore." Startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken, "Doubtless," said I, "what it utters is its only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master, whom unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster, till his songs one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore, of never, nevermore." But the raven, still beguiling all my sad soul into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thanking what this ominous bird of yore, thanking what this ominous bird of yore. What this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking nevermore. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing. To the fowl, whose fiery eyes now burned in my bosom's core, this and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining, on the cushion's velvet lining, that the lamp light gloated over, but whose velvet violet lining, with the lamp light gloating over, she shall press, nevermore. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer. You carry incense and censers. Swung by seraphim, whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. "Wretch," I cried, "thy God hath lent thee, by these angels he hath sent thee, respite, respite, and nepenthe." I really do not know how to pronounce, I think it's nepenthe, I believe. If I am correct, it is a Greek word. I do have the definition here. But basically, nepenthe is something that is a type of drug or a literary expression that helps a person forget and basically eases your pain. Let me see if I can find this in medicine. But let me see how to pronounce this. Nepenthe. So it is nepenthe. Okay. Okay, this is the other one. Let me go back to this one. Respite nepenthe from thy memories of Lenore. So nepenthe is a potion used by the ancients to induce forgetfulness of pain and or sorrow. He wants to forget his pain and sorrow of Lenore. So, from thy memories of Lenore, quaff, oh quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore, quoth the raven, nevermore. So basically the raven is only saying nevermore. Now, obviously the protagonist of the poem, he wants to forget. He's reading books of lost lore to forget, but nothing's working, and the raven keeps basically saying nevermore. "Prophet," said I, "thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, whether tempter sent, or whether tempest tossed thee here ashore, desolate, yet all undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore." Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." So, for those of you who do not know, the balm of Gilead refers to a certain type of balm in a region of Palestine known for its bomb date. No, this is known for its bomb. That's something else. That was about the date of the word, and I accidentally put that here. But anyhow, basically this can refer to an agency that soothes, relieves, or heals. So some people will call something the balm of Gilead if it soothes them. Anyhow, let me continue. Prophet, said I, thing of okay, I did that one. Thing of evil. Prophet still, if bird or devil. So basically, he is literally calling this bird, this raven, a devil. Which, when you consider the implications of naming one of your main protagonist characters, Rinoa, Lenore, and you have Ultimecia, and she is sort of represented by the black feathers, the black wings, that is very prominent in her character. Obviously, if we have one aspect of Rinoa that we can tie back to the narrative influence of Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven, obviously it would make sense that we would have the raven represented in the story too. Now, on the deeper level, you could say the raven is itself the man who is mourning his lost lover, a type of hallucination, a type of delusion that he is having in his mind, and really an illusion that really is there, but actually part of him. And when you consider the belief that Rinoa is Ultimecia, that makes sense. But anyhow, it is interesting that the man is calling the raven a devil. This idea of a black raven being the devil, being sort of an omen of finality, of death, of something really sinister, is there in the poem. By that heaven that bends above us all, by that God we both adore, tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aidenn, and Aidenn or Iden, that means Eden. It is a poetic spelling of Eden. Eden in the Bible, if you do not know, in the Christian Bible, there is a place called Eden. That is basically a garden of paradise and delight that, is mentioned in the Bible. For those of you who may not be Christian or may not understand that implication. Anyhow, clasp a rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels name Lenore, quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word or sign of parting, bird or fiend. When you think about Ultimecia, I think of two words that aptly describe her. Bird, well, I can think of a few words. Bird too, as well, especially considering her toenails are kind of like, they're really sharp and long, like bird's talons. But also fiend and devil are very apt to describe her, especially fiend. I streaked, upstarting, get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out of my heart, and take from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. So, obviously Plutonian, pertaining to the god Pluto, belonging to her suggestive of the underworld, infernal. So he is calling the raven infernal. He is calling the raven a fiend. He is calling the raven a devil. The raven is associated with basically telling this man, never more will you see your lover again. You will never see your lover again. That is what the raven is associated with. So Here we go. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on a pallid bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door, and his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamp light over him streaming throws his shadow on the floor, and my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. So Pallas is a name given to Athena after she either killed a youthful playmate named Pallas, or in some legend the giant's Pallas, or the giant itself. But anyhow, viewers, we have just looked at the poem The Raven. It has a lot of implication when you consider that the lover of this man is Lenore, when you consider that that Rinoa as a name means Lenore. I mean, that was the one with the Italian version of the name. You know, it's a Japanese equivalent of Eleanor, of Lenore. But we have reviewed both meanings of the name. The meaning of royalty, which we can see in the game, as well as the idea of Lenore being a maiden, you know, who the angels named Lenore. This is very interesting. So, as said, Rinoa is seen as a Japanese equivalent of Lenore. This is pretty common knowledge. You can go on many websites and they will all tell you the same thing. Rinoa in Japanese is considered to be equivalent of Lenore. So basically in the Japanese language, this would be what we would call Lenore. And so because of that, you know, we can see the connection that name, you know, would have with the Raven, which mentions a woman named Lenore, which associates this woman Lenore with angels. So I had said before in one of my videos that the moral of the Final Fantasy story, from my perspective, it is basically a play on the Raven. If I had to understand a lesson or a teaching or gain something from the story as a whole, I think I learned the same things from the Raven as I learned from Final Fantasy VIII, which is basically, you know, lost love. You know, the idea that, you know, they will die. You know, Squall had that feeling too when Rinoa was unconscious for the long period of time she was unconscious for. And if we consider Ultimecia, who has raven's wings, you know, hearkening back to that idea of the devil, the fiend, you know, the demon, and this idea that the Raven keeps saying, nevermore, you will never see your love, Lenore. In a sense, for many of us, that seems to us to be, you know, based on, you know, other ideas, which I've mentioned in other videos, which, you know, that seems to be us to be a fall from grace. You know, for those of us who believe that Rinoa is Ultimecia, we can point to a massive amount of parallels. Now, I personally think that when a story has this many parallels, those parallels are intentional. That story has been written in an intentional fashion to have this many parallels. The royal theme of Rinoa and Ultimecia, both of them living in the castle, both of them having wings as sorceresses. Rinoa's connection to Cypher, Ultimecia's connection to Cypher. Rinoa saying that she basically was saying, I think I loved Cypher. That's what she was saying. She was basically saying she loved Cypher. Because Quistis, I believe it was Quistis who asked Rinoa about her relationship with Cypher. And Rinoa will literally say she thinks that she loved him. She said she thinks it was love. That is how much she cared about Cypher. Now, when you consider that Cypher is saying that his romantic dream is to be a sorceress knight, and he eventually gets to fulfill that dream with Ultimecia, if you consider Ultimecia to be Rinoa, and you understand that these two particular people mentioned in the Final Fantasy story, they happen to both have a relationship with Cypher. They just so coincidentally have a relationship with Cypher. And that is one of many parallels we can talk about. One of many. Now, my personal understanding as a believer is that this story has an exoteric and an esoteric narrative. It has two types of conclusions that you can come to as a player. And I think this was somewhat true in Final Fantasy VII, when basically there were so many secrets in the story and so many mysteries in the game and many things that you would think about. However, I think the difference between Final Fantasy VII is that many of those secrets and mysteries in Final Fantasy VII were revealed. I think in Final Fantasy VIII, you could possibly play the game and never really think about Rinoa being Ultimecia, but some people will think, I've paid attention, I found many parallels between Rinoa and Ultimecia, and I think they are the same person. I think you can technically have both conclusions be equally as valid when the story is written in a fashion in which the story is meant to hide something. And I think that is the case in Final Fantasy VIII. Many people have said that they believe the story is fundamentally unfinished, and I do not believe that. I do not agree with that. I think that whatever writer was putting all of these parallels into the story, even choosing the names, even the name Artemisia, which, you know, I think is very obviously being used as the base for Ultimecia, which is just ultimate with the suffix of cia. If you look at that name, historically there was an Artemisia, you know, spelled with an Artemisia. This woman would have her husband would die. She would mourn over him, and basically what she did was she was drinking his ashes because she really wanted him to be inside her. She never wanted to leave him, and so she drank his ashes out of grief, out of mourning. So even that is interesting, but I would have to say, based on all of the parallels and narrative details, I would say that there is an equally valid esoteric conclusion you can come to. What esoteric means is hidden. What exoteric means is something openly exposed, something most people will see. I believe Final Fantasy VIII is written and presented in a way you could play this game and very logically come to the conclusion based upon narrative logic and parallels and different things that are presented to you in the story. For example, them telling you that guardian forces will affect your memory. And basically what guardian forces will do, the longer you have these guardian forces, the more memories you will lose. So much so that even people who are 17 years of age do not even remember what they were doing when they were 9 or 7, 8, or 9, basically, very young children. And they had a good deal of fellow orphans, but they cannot even remember them. This is how bad their memory happens to be. They cannot even remember where they were when they were little children. They do not even remember that they were basically together when they were children. They meet each other, and they cannot even recognize when each other excuse me. They cannot even recognize each other based on facial recognition, based on voice recognition, all of those things. They cannot recognize one another. They just cannot do it. because the guardian forces that they have junction means to join, that they have joined to their bodies, these spiritual beings that are inside them, are destroying their memories. They cannot really remember very much. So if you take that into consideration, you put all of the parallels between Rinoa and Ultimecia together, and you look at, the backstory that you have presented about Ultimecia, you may come to the conclusion that Rinoa somehow is going to survive into the future, is hunted by seeds, loses her memories, and decides to fight for her life with the Guardian Force Griever, which is an idea of Squall's, which they very plainly tell you when you scan Griever. But one interesting thing is that the only person that Squall told about the Lion Griever was Rinoa. So if Griever is an idea of pride and strength, a proud and strong lion that is been formed in Squall's mind, obviously if he tells Rinoa in that very pivotal scene, you can use your own, you can use your own deductive reasoning to conclude, well, if Squall has this idea and Rinoa was so fascinated by the lion as to steal his ring, we would imagine this lion is very important to Rinoa too, so much so that if this is a type of spiritual entity, a guardian force, then clearly Rinoa would have had it in her mind. And if she is left with nothing, but this idea, perhaps if everything is gone, her lover, her friends, the seeds have turned on her because she's a sorceress and there's no one to protect her, and she has to fight for herself, against these witch hunters. Obviously, the idea of Griever is significant, especially if you consider that Squall is either dead, and the only thing you can preserve about him is this idea of the lion. And, that is very interesting. And I would have to say that one of the things that makes this work is the pivotal scene between Squall and Rinoa when they are talking about this ring and the lion. But furthermore, that is just one of the parallels that we can talk about in the story. There are many things that seem to be foreshadowing something in the story and very significant, but only seem to be mentioned a few times. But anyhow, I would say that the story is written in such a way, where Rinoa, I think this is sort of implicit in the story. If you play the game without this belief that Rinoa is Ultimecia, and you do not come to this conclusion, you will play through the game and fight a final boss that you do not understand. You will not understand why Ultimecia is so brutal and savage. When you go to her castle and you see the dead seeds, you will think, wow, Ultimecia is a different type of sorceress. She's horrible. Even Adele was living in Esther, and she sort of ruled as a tyrant, but she wasn't just, massacring people. But for Ultimecia, it is different. Ultimecia is completely cold, to the point where you would say there has to be a reason behind how evil Ultimecia is. And so one significant thing about Ultimecia is that she is using the Paramagic cast animation. You can watch my other video about the magic, the visual effects of magic, and you can learn about that. But basically, there are some interesting details about her. But I think what Rinoa, I think the name is very important. I think that the writers, based on everything I've read, based on my experience playing the game for years, I think they really did take the narrative implications of the names into account as they were creating this story, these characters. I think this really is a story about love and loss. I've done quite a few videos about Final Fantasy VIII. Some of them you might want to see because I talk more about, Griever. I talk more about the implications of Rinoa being Ultimecia. But I think even if you come to what I consider to be the exoteric interpretation of the story, which I think is very significant, you can benefit from knowing what the names mean too, what possible significance the names have. Because based on what I've seen, I think no one can deny that there's a theme of royalty with Rinoa, and there's a theme of angels, of angelic, of her being angelic. I think that is pretty obvious. So, I would have to say that this game is very significant, and I think that this has basically been what I have thought ever since I was a kid. In this video, I did not want to talk too much about her being Ultimecia because I really wanted to show you the significance of the name. I just wanted to do that for the most part. I did not really want to talk too much about, my belief and the beliefs of many people that she is Ultimecia, because I think many people are going to have to come to their own conclusions. As for me, there is no doubt regarding this. There's no doubt she is Ultimecia. I think that the writers are very intelligent. I would say that. I think that the writers were skillful enough to put this in the story. And I think even Yoshinori Kitase, when he was retracting his statement that Ultimecia was not, Rinoa, and he was saying, well, she could be, Ultimecia could be Rinoa. And he was saying that, Nojima was very famous for putting very secretive things in his story. And I can see that in Final Fantasy VIII. There are too many parallels. So much so to the point where there will be certain people who will play the game, they paid attention to the story, they looked at all of the parallels, and they came to the conclusion, wait, we do not know anything about Ultimecia. There's nothing really that tells us about who she is in the story. And so if we're aligning all of these parallels together, no one is going to tell us that Ultimecia is Rinoa. But if we use our minds to link together all of these similarities, we come to that conclusion. Some people will come to that conclusion. And of course, there will be people who will be angry about that, but there's not really anything any of us can do because we really believe it. We played through the game. And so a lot of us who talk about this, we have more details about the game than just about anyone else does. We have more passion about the story than anyone else does. We're satisfied with all of those 4 discs. It does not need to be remade. It does not need a remake. It does not need to be changed. The story is perfect for us because we understand it fully with our belief. When you consider the theme of having a video game based upon witchcraft and magic and sorceresses, if you know anything about witches, you know that they practice the occult. Occult means hidden. Esoteric means hidden. Many witches, for the most part, practice what may be called mysteries in a religious sense, whether you consider them to be pagan mysteries or otherwise. In a religious sense, the mysteries of Greece or anywhere else are things in which a common man will not understand, but wise people will understand the mystery. And so this is why you have the words esoteric and occult. You also have the word exoteric. So if you were making a game about witchcraft, let us say me or you or anyone else who were knowledgeable upon the subject were making a game about witchcraft. And we learned about esotericism. And the people who made this game obviously have a high degree of knowledge about witchcraft. They've proven it just by, all of the concepts they have presented in the game. Them hiding something from us would not be something atypical in a real narrative that really presents, some influences from witchcraft. Because if you know anything about, the mysteries regarding sorcery, magic, and the like, esoteric things are hidden things. And from what I can see, the story hides things. And I know that may seem like a strange thing, but if you play Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VII hid things too. When we were fighting Sephiroth, a lot of us did not know, or at least when we used to meet Sephiroth in the game, a lot of us, we thought that was the real Sephiroth, and that wasn't just something made out of Genova cells. And Genova, was not just traveling around and sort of taking on the form. We did not know that Sephiroth was, in Mount Gaia or wherever he was. There are some mysteries in Final Fantasy VII. If you play Final Fantasy VII, the original Final Fantasy VII, not the remake, the original Final Fantasy VII, you will see that there are more than a few mysteries and things that are even hidden in the story that you would never understand unless you do certain things or really think about some of the things it presents. Now, I think Final Fantasy VIII is a bit more advanced in regard to that, and even the ending for Final Fantasy VII was quite mysterious because you really did not know what happened. You just saw that Midgar was overgrown. You did not see any of the other characters, but you saw Nanaki, running around with his, future pups. But other than that, you were left to speculate and to wonder. And I think the ending for Final Fantasy VIII was quite significant. With Rinoa being in the ballroom, with her face sort of shifting, and sort of you can't really make it out. It's strange. It was just an odd scene. And they even do a flash to where you see Ultimecia's face during that particular cutscene, that ending cutscene. But Final Fantasy VIII is a very strange game, and personally, I think Final Fantasy VIII is a narrative, is a story that hides things. Now, you would say, why would Squaresoft do that? Well, this was Squaresoft before it became Square Enix. And if you know how advanced some of those Squaresoft narratives were, whether you were talking about Final Fantasy VII or Final Fantasy VIII or Xenogears, they were all using a good deal of psychological narrative. In other words, they were really going into the character's mind. They were putting mysteries in the game. They were, Final Fantasy VII and VIII were very mysterious. Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy IX, however, was more about the effects and the horrors of war and so forth. Even though you had a bunch of, to me, Final Fantasy IX did not seem serious. It did not seem mature. But Final Fantasy VII and VIII were fairly mature. Final Fantasy IX was more lighthearted, and a lot of things were just sort of given to you in regard to story. In other words, if you have to compare the Final Fantasy IX story, well, the story is very, it really is very, how should I say, the story of Final Fantasy IX is very out in the open. There are not many mysteries in Final Fantasy IX. There are a few, certainly more than most Square Enix games. Most Square Enix Final Fantasy games have very few mysteries in them and very few things you can just think on and just think, wait, I wonder what the meaning of this is, and you can really just spend hours or play the game over 4 or 5 times, and you still have not really come to a definitive conclusion. And I think with Final Fantasy VII and VIII they did that, though in regard to Final Fantasy VIII, some of these parallels that we found in the story were so blatant that there were some of us who played Final Fantasy VIII, and we sort of, at that point, we just sort of thought, wow, this game, this romance is really unique. It really is good. And there were other people who did not like Final Fantasy VIII, and I think those are people who, for the most part, had a very exoteric view of the story. In other words, Rinoa and Ultimecia are two different people. Ultimecia is a villain with no backstory. This is a terrible game. But for those of us who saw so many parallels between Ultimecia and Rinoa, and we kind of connected things, and we thought, wait, you know, there are too many parallels that we can speak of. But anyhow, this video, as I said, I'm not really going to get into that subject of really talking too much about that. I have made many videos. If you want to see any of them, I have a whole playlist. I am also doing a retrospective look at Final Fantasy VIII, the original PlayStation 1 Final Fantasy VIII, where basically I look at the game footage and talk about what my old experiences, what I think about certain things. I've made only 2 episodes of that. I do plan to do more Final Fantasy VIII content. I'm trying to keep each video specific to its purpose. So for this video, this is about names. The other video might be about something different. So there was a lot I did not say and explain in this video. However, for those of you who want to know things about Griever, things about magic and paramagic, I would refer you to the other videos I've made. Anyhow, viewers, I really did enjoy this. This was quite an excellent talk. May you be blessed, and farewell, viewers.